Hello and welcome to the Stress Mastery Podcast. Finally, it's Saturday, and I am beyond happy to be your host of our Saturday episode. My name is Peggy Romero. Here I am. Thank you for joining me. This week we've been talking about detachment. When this broadcasts, it will be the day after St. Patrick's Day, so I decided to hook onto that. My mom's parents both came from Ireland, full-blooded Irish, so I'm half Irish. My family is a really proud heritage of being Irish. So if she were here, she'd been dancing a jig and eating corned beef and cabbage yesterday and saying, "Erin go bra." So in her honor, I was trying to find a way to attach the subject of detachment to St. Patrick's Day. Well, Irish people are lucky, so there's my hook. I'm going to talk to you guys today about how lucky I am and how lucky I believe you can be too. I'm using the word lucky instead of blessed because it's St. Patrick's Day, but you guys know I am greatly blessed. I always say God always blesses me, and that's because he always does. So here we go. Normally, when I'm doing my podcast, which this week was no different, I look up the topic and I start to get a feel for the word well ahead of the time that I'm, recording, right? So to start thinking about it and feeling like, how do I feel about this subject? So I generally have the opportunity to listen to at least a couple of Bill's episodes before I record my own. And I did hear Set Up Sunday this morning, and Bill said that the definition of attachment was incorrect as it pertains to Stress Mastery anyways. So this time I'm really on my own. I'll be traveling for the next few weeks, and I'm super busy this week ahead, so I planned my podcast early, and I'm recording the next 3 early. So that is to say, I don't get to use Bill's massive amounts of wisdom and knowledge to write my own podcast this time. I can usually glean at least a little bit of this and that from Bill or David, but that's just not the case, so here goes nothing. So my idea of talking about detachment this week begins with thinking about the things that we're attached to. So I looked up Google like I always do, and it says that the meaning of attachment is to be emotionally connected. But here's some synonyms that I just found for the word attached. Tied, bound, affixed, assigned. Yuck. That sounds really like tight, right? Constricting, pretty strong words to me. So how attached are you to your past? How attached are you to the people who no longer serve you in your life? How about all those losses and failures that you've had? How attached are you to what you used to be, or what used to be in general, or who you used to know? You see where I'm going with this? We can't live our life looking backwards. We need to detach from all that pain, from all that stuff. We need to be willing to release it so that we can live in peace. So Bill was talking Sunday about detachment and talking about babies not feeling emotionally connected, attached. So I know a lot of people who suffer with this. I know a lot of people who either struggle because of how they were raised by their parents, maybe when they were babies or just little kids, but also because of what's happened to them in their life. Early in their life, in their midlife, whenever. Like, we're all affected by the things that happen. So we need to know that we need to detach ourselves from that, from those people and events that hurt us. But we also need to detach ourselves from our own mistakes. We're so stinking hard on ourselves. We have to be able to forgive ourselves and move on. So I'm not sure how I started carrying the heaps of baggage that I had, but I've done a really good job over the past few years of letting it go, and I'm so happy because life is easier when it's not so heavy and not so full of burden. So here's something I know for sure. If your heart is full of strife and grief and sorrow and regret and mourning, then that's what your life will be full of. Whatever's in your heart is what your life is going to be. That's where your creation is. So you're just creating it over and over and over. If you don't want that, you have to be willing to drop all that stuff. You have to detach from those negative thoughts. You can't put new thoughts in on top of the old ones. They don't fit. Your head's already full of junk. The old ones will just keep coming through and coming through. You can't live in peace and love and joy if your heart is full of sadness. I'm telling you, I know that 100% for a fact. And I'm going to assume that you're all willing to let all that stuff go and begin your life anew. So let me ask you, do you feel lucky? Because I sure do. Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm so lucky. And if you plan on being lucky, you'll be lucky too. So I used to make my friends kind of mad because I would earnestly and honestly say that I'm God's favorite. I know it kind of bugs people, and it was sort of a joke, but then, not really, because I do feel like God's favorite. I am so highly favored and richly blessed, you can't even believe it. So no one can take that from me. You can be highly favored and richly blessed too, but me too. I feel like God's favorite, so that's all I'm going to say. Just claim it if you want it. It's yours too. It's out there. I'm not saying you can't have it. Go for it. So are you ready for the new things that you're going to be able to have? Are you ready to feel lucky and know that you can have what you truly desire? Or do you want to keep just holding on to the past, the hurt, and all that muck and just keep jogging through yuck? I say, let it go. If you guys could see me now compared to when I was a kid, oh my gosh, you would never know that I was the same person. For those of you who knew me when I was a teenager or a young adult or even a kid, you would never believe that I'd have a podcast right now that broadcasts all over the world. Number 243 most downloaded in Singapore just a couple weeks ago. Me, Peggy Romero. Oh my gosh. People email me on my Peggy with Purpose and say, thank you to me. I mean, what the heck? So I'm constantly trying to step out and be bold and claim what is here for me. Detach myself from the feelings of I can't and attach myself to what can be. My 6th grade teacher told me after I painted this still, I think it was called a still life, a oil painting of a fruit bowl. Yeah, maybe you just weren't meant to be an artist. You're not very creative. You guys, I never drew again. Never. I still haven't yet. I believed her. I don't even remember her name, but for the past 45 or 50 years, I decided I wasn't creative. But you guys, I'm an author. I was a house flipper for 10 years. I raised my kids doing that. My mom used to say, necessity is the mother of invention. Well, I say, necessity evokes creativity. I had to be creative. I was a hairdresser, and that takes creativity. I've made beautiful landscaped yards, waterfalls, paths, flowers, like mixing them together and adding other foliage. My yards look nice. My houses look good. I've taken down walls and repainted every room, and every single house I've ever had looks different several times. I love creating and changing things. Instant gratification is what I always say about painting. I love to wake up in the morning, paint a room, and then move all my items around, my plants and candles and all my home decorations, and just make everything look totally different at the end of the day. Oh, I love it. But in my head, I had it that I wasn't creative, but I've done that at least, I don't know, maybe 30, 40, maybe more times. I don't know. I'm just telling you, let go of the stories. I'm creative, and you probably are too. And who cares what they said? Like I said, I don't even remember that teacher's name. So the reason I'm talking to you about creativity is because I have this whole new life that I created. I'm an author, a speaker, a coach. I'm a podcaster. It's because I am creative, lucky and creative. So I want to tell you guys about my luck, because I have crazy luck. And I was going to move backwards starting from right now, but I think I'm going to start from clear back then. So, okay, I got married really young, shotgun wedding, and I was in a terrible marriage for 10 years. So I did get my 2 oldest kids, Melissa and Tyler, out of that, so I can never regret what I went through. But it was the saddest day of my life when he told me he wanted a divorce. I'm telling you, I thought my life was over. He told me he would never get anywhere as long as he was with me. Wow, crashing blow, because I had really felt like I was building us a good life. So I already had this really low self-esteem and terrible self-worth. I was trashed by his words. I was crushed. So luckily, I went to my hairdresser to get a haircut, and she'd been cutting my hair for probably 5 years. So she says, Peg, you're fantastic. Go to school and get your hairdresser license. You don't need him. You can run this shop for me because I'm going to start having kids and I won't want to be here all the time. You could be the manager. What? Wow. Okay. Well, believe me, guys, I had no plans. I had no idea what I was going to do because I didn't work. I mean, he took care of me. So that sounded really good to me. So I went to beauty school right away. And sure enough, she called me because she got pregnant before I even started working there. But then after about a year, she found out that her baby was special needs. So this completely changed her life and she could no longer work there. Well, lucky for me, when I was downtown cutting hair at the school, I'd met this guy named Art. And he would come in for his $3 haircut, and we became good friends. I started going out to coffee with him twice a week on my morning break because he was just a lonely old guy. Well, when I moved out to the hair salon, it was about 10 miles away from downtown where he lived. But he still came out there to see me to get his haircut. And as luck would have it, so did like 10 or 12, maybe not 20, but 10 or 15 other people. It was pretty incredible for a girl right out of beauty school. I mean, they liked me. So when Dolores told me that she had to sell the shop, I'd been building up a customer base. And finally, I had a little bit of wiggle room. I was starting to be able to support my kids. It was amazing. And when she told me that she had to either sell the shop to I didn't know who would buy it or shut it down, I was devastated. I mean, I was just barely, maybe a year and a half out of this abusive marriage. I was finally starting, to get some strides and stand on my own 2 feet and see who I was, barely making it, but I was happy because I was doing it myself. And I didn't want to have to move to another place and start over again. And I couldn't afford to go take a minimum wage job cutting hair at like Supercuts or something. Well, I couldn't afford to take a minimum wage job anywhere for that matter. Well, Art comes in for his haircut and I tell him my tale of woe. Guys, I had no idea how much money Art had. He was a multimillionaire getting $3 haircuts. I mean, who'd have thunk it? Well, Art bought the shop for me. And he told me that I didn't have to pay him back because he said I wouldn't be making enough to make any payments. He told me that I'd have to hire people just to make it. And he helped me with a business plan. And I promised him that I was going to stick to it no matter what. I was not about to sink. And he was telling me that while I was doing all this stuff, that I'd even be struggling to pay the rent at my apartment. So you know what he did? He put a down payment on a house for me. You guys, seriously, so that my payment would always be the same. This was completely innocent. He was like 80-something years old, and I was 20-something years old. And he wasn't a sugar daddy. It was nothing like that. Believe me. I'm not that kind of a woman now, and I certainly wasn't back then in my 20s either. I don't care how much money you have. It's just not me. Anyways, God put him in my life. I was good to this old guy. I would spend my coffee break with him because he was lonely. I didn't expect anything from him. And he knew I wasn't using him because he never told me that he had money. Amazing. Talk about lucky. So I did hire people, and that salon was going great. So then I didn't have to work as much because I was making money from these people paying me rent. And I'm probably 30 or 31 years old now because a couple of years have passed. Maybe I was 26, about to turn 27 when I got a divorce. So I decide I'm going to go to real estate school. So I go to real estate school. I get my license. I'm doing that on nights and weekends, cutting hair in the day. And I tell one of my customers that I got my real estate license, and she says, yeah, we have a house that we really want to sell, but it would never get financing. It needs too much work. But if you ever meet somebody who is credible that would want to buy a house on contract, well, say no more, Dorothy. I want to buy a house on contract, and I'm credible. A week later, guys, that house was mine. We wrote up a contract, bing, bang, boom, it was my house. So now I have a house that I'm paying for near my office or my salon, and I have a rental house too. Guys, the new house was 3 apartments. It needed work. It really did. It needed a lot of work. But that's okay because I'm a worker. Lucky? Yes, I'd say so. Highly favored? Here's something really funny about that house. So I'm a hairdresser, and I have, my my skirts on and my high heels, and I'm young and full of energy. And I have so much work to do at the house because I want to one of the apartments was rented. The other two weren't. They needed work. They needed painting and floors and paper and all this stuff. So I have so much work to do at the house that it was about maybe 11 or 12 minutes away from my salon. So I had coveralls, those worker men's coveralls. I had a pair of those at the house, and I would drive home between clients. If I had like at least an hour or two, I would go pull those up over my stuff, put my hair in a ponytail, and go finish my flooring or painting or whatever, hanging cabinets. You see, I was constantly juggling, trying to handle everything. I didn't know the easy way to do anything because I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anybody going before me to show me the way. I didn't have a group of friends to follow or to encourage me. I always tell you guys, there was no internet back then, so I couldn't, look it up on how to do it, or no YouTube videos or anything. I mean, I had friends that would cheer me on, but they didn't know how to help me. They didn't know how to do what I was doing. They couldn't even figure out why I was doing it. So a few years go by, and I end up buying property in Washington on another contract. So I live in the inner city of Portland, and I wanted to get my kids out into the country. I thought that it would be an easier life for them out there, less crime and all that. So after some time, I got married, and we tried to figure out how to build up there. So we hired what they call a ditch witch. So that's who's supposed to find your water for you. They tell you where to dig your well. Well, they couldn't find water. We hired them 2 or 3 times, and each time you had to pay like $1,000. Believe me, I couldn't afford it. And then all of a sudden, a few years go by, and I get a letter that they're going to run water, city water, out to the property. They had been saying this would never happen because it was like 8 miles from town, 8 miles from where the last water was, and everybody had wells. And you know what? It was free. I didn't have to pay for it. You guys, I just saved like $25,000 or $30,000 because I didn't have to dig a well. Talk about lucky. Now, while all this is happening in the background, the real estate in Portland is like doubling and just probably every 4 or 5 years going up. That house that I bought on contract for $55,000, I sold for, I think, $239,000. Now, this was a house my parents begged me not to buy, but I had to let go of the attachment of their approval. I always wanted their approval, but I had to say no. I had to detach myself from the lack mentality that I'd been raised with. That's what I always had, barely scraping by. A few years later, a friend of mine calls me. She moved up to Alaska, and she said, Peggy, if you want to buy that house over there by the church on a contract, I'll sell it to you for $150,000. Oh, well, I don't think you should sell it for $150,000 because it's worth at least $225,000. If I fix it up, I'll probably get $250,000. She said, no, that's okay. I said, you're giving me like $100,000. And she goes, that's okay, Peg. There's no one else on earth I'd rather give $100,000 to. And she sold me the house on a contract. Wow. So at that same time, I'm finally getting a little ahead financially now. And I had decided I was going to go to college. So we had to move again at this time because we moved to the house I just bought because once again, it needed work. That's why people are selling them on contract. So there's only so much time in a day, and I couldn't have the kids over at one house and then be going to school and working on this house over here. So at least we were home together, even though I always had a project. I still was with the kids and, dinner and all that. So my kids still make jokes about me being up at 4 a.m. working on the house. And I told him, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you up. I was hammering softly. Yeah, hammering softly while they slept. So they always make fun of me about that. So we lived there, and I went to school, and so did they. And I knew I finally had enough money to start paying for community college. So I had enough at least for the first few terms. I looked it up and everything. So I go to the school to register, and they tell me, well, you have to take these tests, and you have to apply for financial aid. You guys, I felt like I was kicked in the stomach. I still remember how rattled I was. Like, oh no, they're not going to let me in. Oh my gosh. You see, I quit high school when I was 15 years old. And it was another one of those stories, the programs that I carried with me my whole life. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I blew it. I'm a failure. I'm a loser. Peggy, you couldn't even graduate high school. So of course I was afraid that they weren't going to accept me into community college. No, I told them. I don't need financial aid. Do you need to see my bank account? I have money. Well, she explained that everybody has to sign up for financial aid. It's a government thing, and that they might even be able to help me. Well, crud, I wish I would have known that 20 years sooner. I'd always wanted to be a nurse and a teacher. I wanted to go to college for the longest time. And now finally I have money in my hand, but I'm nearly 40 years old. Well, as it turned out, since I'm a single mom with kids at home, I didn't really have steady income. I had money from flipping houses and stuff. I did get financial aid. It was a different story when I went to university. I had to pay a lot more for that, but I was off and running by then. There was no stopping me. But I did get help with my associate's degree. So lucky, huh? I never had to stop and go make more money because I just got through it. I think that's really lucky. And I forgot to tell you guys the part where the city of Portland changed the zoning rules, and one of my houses was on a lot that could now be divided. Well, once again, stepped out of my comfort zone, detached from the I can't attitude, and paid a surveyor, split the lot, and just overnight, boom, I made $75,000. You guys, this is what was able to get me through school, because I didn't have to keep going to work because I wanted to be at home with my kids. But I want you guys to realize that I'm building confidence step by step, because I didn't have the confidence to do these things. I didn't know how to do them. I just had to believe that I could. I had to detach from the stories of, you're not enough, Peggy, you can't do it. Every time I was paralyzed in fear. I could see it. I could feel the hesitation. I knew I didn't want to get out. And then the regret of not making bold moves over time really started setting in, and I was so sick of it. I had let lots of things slip through my hands. These opportunities I'm telling you about, they're not the only opportunities I had. I had many others that I missed. Do you think I knew how to flip houses and sell them when I started? Of course not. My dad hadn't done it. My brothers hadn't done it. My friends hadn't done it. I didn't know anyone who did, but I did. And I'm the one who had the guts to change my life. I was the one who was able to detach from the stories, to stand up from my parents and say, no, Mom and Dad, I don't want to just get by. I don't want to be content. I don't want to be poor. So yeah, lucky that I was blessed with guts and determination. Thank you, God. One more thing I'm going to tell you guys. That house that the friends sold to me, knowing that I'd make a big profit, I fixed it up and sold it. And that was the money that I used to buy my insurance agency. But I only bought a small insurance agency. For some reason, I thought I was just dipping my toe in the water. So I bought a small book of business. Wow, I wish I'd have been better advised, but c'est la vie. I was barely getting by the first year. So I gave them my notice after a year because my next door neighbor worked for the FBI, and she told me of a couple of really good jobs that she could get me there because now I had my degree. So one of the managers, who was not even my manager at Allstate, called me and asked if he could come over to my office and talk. Oh yeah, sure. I couldn't figure out while I was waiting, for him to come, for the life of me, why does this guy want to come and talk to me? I'd only seen him a couple of times at meetings. We barely talked. I mean, I'm sure I said hi because I'm friendly, but, I don't know. Couldn't figure it out. But he came in and told me, yeah, Peggy, the upper management is really rattled that you gave your notice. They just really didn't see it coming because you're doing so well. It was just out of the blue. And I said, well, that may be well and true, but I'm not making enough money. I don't want to keep working this long, this hard, and using my own money to live on. I'm putting every single penny that I make back into this agency, and I can do it for a year more, but why would I? They just turned me down to buy another book of business, which would give me some wiggle room, a little bit of money to take home. Well, here's the surprise, guys. Here's the luck. Peggy, what if I give you some policies? I'll just give them to you, and these policies will bring you in about $80,000 a year. Why on earth would you give me those? Because I asked if I could be your manager next year, and it looks really good, and I intend to help you be very successful. I see what you're doing. You guys, he was my manager the next year, and he did help me succeed for no reason. I mean, yeah, once I was under him, he had a reason because the better his agents do, the better he does. But he just saw me at meetings. He just saw my numbers and wanted to help me. I mean, he didn't even know me. I just said hi to him a couple times. Honestly, that's it. I wasn't even sure the guy knew my name. But everything happens for a reason, and there are no accidents. He didn't come out of the blue, but he did. Luckily. Now, of course, you guys who listen to the podcast know that I ended up being so stressed out. My agency grew and grew, and I had all this staff, and I ended up being so unhappy with my personal life that I ended up selling that agency, an agency that I really loved. But after that, I worked for a bit and focused on my marriage, and I was helping some other agents that I knew. And then I got a call from my old manager in Oregon who heard that I was in Arizona, and now he's in Arizona. And boom, another big break. I got an agency that brought in several $100,000 a year in profit. So amazing. Oh, so lucky. And as it turned out, I wasn't happy at that agency either, but God had that all set up. No accidents. I sold it to this beautiful young woman who had been working there like 10 years prior to me ever getting there. And now she's the Allstate agent and she's killing it. And you see, that makes me so happy because that's my purpose in this whole life. I love to help people. I love to help people succeed. I was able to give her confidence and help her grow. And now she's doing awesome. And she has a staff that she's raising up. It's just so beautiful to see. So that was a win-win-win because Allstate won. They didn't have to shut down their door. I made a profit when I sold it to her, and now she's making lots of money. So right after I sold the agency in Arizona is when Bill asked me if I wanted to work with him. I mean, freaking lucky. Thank you, God. Oh my gosh, you guys. You see how life goes? I started out in this tumultuous home, destined to be a housewife. My first 20-something years were full of hurt and lack and heartbreak. See, that had been mine when I was married. All of those times that he left me, I was probably meant for him to just let him go out the door because all of this stuff didn't start coming back to me until I was able to detach, until I was able to let him go, till I was able to let go of that life and the stories. I had to let go of the story and the attachment to, you can't get divorced, it's a sin. I mean, nobody in my family had ever been divorced. That was my parents' story, not mine. I couldn't live my future the way that it was supposed to be and stay in the past. But once I detached myself, I ended up living a life better than I could ever imagine. You guys, all I'd ever known was lack and barely enough. But God had something better in store for me. And I just had to believe in myself. I just had to let the other stuff go. I didn't have enough faith in myself and in God to believe that things could be better until I did. You get it? I got so tired of my old life that I had to let it go. I mean, seriously, when you're in a marriage like that, your self-esteem is so low and somebody leaves you that many times, you don't feel valuable anymore. I don't remember the things that he said to me, but they couldn't have been too nice. Again, gotta let stuff go, and I'm so happy I don't remember a stinking thing he ever said. I realized that a few years ago. I don't even remember what his voice sounds like. I don't care what he said. I'm not even sure I'd recognize him if he called me on the phone. So weird, because at one point, he was my whole world. I thought that my life would be nothing without him. And now, blessings are chasing me down. You guys, I'm not saying that your luck or your circumstances will be the same as mine. I'm just saying that right there in front of you, you got to look for them every day. Carpe diem, seize the day. They're there. Be willing to be gutsy when a good opportunity comes by, because they're going to come by. And you can do all things as long as you believe you can. That little spark in your heart, that desire, that dream, it's yours for the taking. Really, go for it. I love Green Focus Power Hour. It's so funny. When I first started, and Bill told me that I had to meditate, I thought he was trying to transfer me into Buddhism or something. I had to detach from all my religious beliefs that I had. Now I love to meditate. It's so awesome. I can just sit there and just be. I can relax and just vision my beautiful, lucky, and lovely future. So am I lucky? Oh, heck yeah. I encourage every one of you to let go of your past. Let go of the stories. Detach. Drop the emotional baggage because you don't need it. Attach yourself to the beautiful future where you get to create everything that's happening in your wonderful world. That's my podcast on detachment. And that is it for today's show. And I thank you so much for joining me today. Remember, I'm Peggy with Purpose. But even more importantly, remember, guys, our mission here is to create a shift in the planet. And we would love you to join us on that mission. Just like, share, and subscribe. The links are right below the show notes. As always, until next time, stay inspired.